The deadly siege of Gaza shows no sign of stopping tonight as both sides in this war refuse to back down. This is a Sky News special programme live from Jerusalem. Israel vows to keep bombing Gaza until all its people being held hostage are released. We witness the human cost, with hospitals in Gaza overwhelmed and overflowing with the casualties of war. Sharing in Israel's horror, America's top diplomat reacts after being shown images appearing to show babies killed and soldiers beheaded.
It's simply depravity in the worst imaginable way. Images are worth 1,000 words. These images may be worth 1,000,000.
Meanwhile, Israel's military chief admits security failings. The UK. Good evening. A war that has already claimed the lives of more than 2,500 people is showing no signs of relenting tonight. Israel has vowed to keep bombing the Gaza Strip until Hamas frees its hostages, but the militant group says it has no plans to negotiate or surrender. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has today released shocking pictures appearing to show murdered babies and beheaded soldiers, evidence he claims that justify his all-out war and what he's about to do next in Gaza. More than 1,500 people have been killed in Gaza in total since Saturday. Gaza Health Ministry says around half of those killed are women and children, and more than 6,000 others have been injured. 14 health facilities have also been damaged, including Beit Hanun Hospital, which has had to close. And the UN says 339,000 Gazans have been displaced. That's a jump of 30% in the last day. This is the scene live tonight in Gaza. The Red Cross has warned hospitals will be turned into morgues without electricity. But Israel has said there will be no humanitarian exceptions until its people are freed. A warning, this report by Diana Magne on the siege of Gaza contains images of children injured in the bombing.
Hamas will be crushed, is what Israel's Prime Minister has said. And this is the sound of Israeli vengeance. Who knows how many inside these body bags were Hamas militants, and how many more were not? Just Palestinian civilians trying to live their lives, now trying to bury their dead when the cemeteries are full to bursting. There is so much loss here already, and Israel shows no sign of stopping. How can you console this kind of pain? A boy in Gaza's Shifa hospital, shaking like a tiny sparrow. No child should have to be broken like this, to suffer on both sides from a conflict they had no part in creating. But because the bombs keep falling, the patients keep flooding in. This is chaos, a confusion of stretchers, of injured everywhere that you look. And remember, when the generators stop under Israel's total blockade of electricity, of fuel, of water, this will get even worse.
There were around 20 apartments, about 250 people living in them, all of them women, children, and old people like me.
Israel's airstrikes are relentless, and people take shelter where they can. At the Ayan Hotel in Gaza City, the corridors are rammed. Just one nurse to treat the wounded here with the hotel medical kit. We need paramedics, this woman says. But how would they get here when the bombs outside keep falling 100 meters or so away? Her husband's clothes were torn from his body by the force of the blast. He's confused and unsteady. He checks to see where he was hit, tries to still the ringing in his ears.
A missile hit in the square and there was rubble hitting us as we were walking. There was glass, metal. It was like doomsday.
لنجهز أنفسنا يجهز شبابنا في الأردن في
On Al-Aqsa TV, run by Hamas and still operational, a call for further resistance from across the Arab world. But Hamas's terrible actions have resulted in this. This woman, delirious with grief, has lost 4 members of her family and swears vengeance on Israel. You killed me while I'm alive, she screams. And how to break the cycle of violence in the face of this. Diana Magnay, Sky News.
Well, Israel's Prime Minister has tonight produced shocking images that he claims show the murder of babies and the beheadings of soldiers by Hamas militants. The images were presented to the United States top diplomat who has visited Israel in a show of solidarity. Antony Blinken said the graphic pictures showed depravity in the worst imaginable way, and he offered unwavering support to Israel. The question now, is this the pretext to a full-scale ground invasion of Gaza? In the small strip of land, all border crossings have been closed, with Israel imposing a full-on siege as the remaining fuel, food and water runs out. We'll hear from our chief correspondent at the site where hundreds of partygoers were murdered by Hamas, and also from our security and defence editor in southern Israel. But our next report comes from our Middle East correspondent in Jerusalem. And a warning, Alistair Bunkle's report contains distressing images we have chosen to obscure.
Antony Blinken is on a tour of the Middle East to try and stop this war escalating. He landed in Tel Aviv first to show America's support for Israel.
I came to Israel bearing a simple message. The United States stands with Israel and with its people. Today, tomorrow, every day. We're delivering on those needs as we speak, and we will work closely and swiftly with Congress to meet them as they evolve.
Hamas is ISIS, and just as ISIS was crushed, so too will Hamas be crushed. And Hamas should be treated exactly the way ISIS was treated.
After the meeting, Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted some of the photos he'd showed Blinken. 2 were the charred bodies of babies. A third had multiple bullet wounds. Blinken was visibly shocked.
I think for any human being to see this, it's really beyond almost anything that we can comprehend, digest. Images are worth 1,000 words. These images may be worth 1,000,000.
In Gaza, new figures released by the Gaza Health Ministry today said that 447 children have been killed in Gaza over the last 6 days. The Israeli Defense Forces believe Hamas are disorientated after their bombing in recent days. But today, the militant group said there would be no surrender until the battle is over. The US Secretary of State later met some of the people who survived the massacre at the music festival on Saturday.
I admire your strength, and also telling your stories makes a big difference too. The world needs to know this.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will, and we're there with you. We're there for you.
We see. Thank you. Thank you.
From Israel, Antony Blinken is taking the short flight across to Amman in Jordan, where he'll meet the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. He will then go to Qatar, which has a direct line to Hamas, to try and negotiate the release of some of the hostages. The Israeli troop build-up on the northern border continues. It hasn't escalated there yet, but there have been some limited exchanges of fire and false alarms. There is a fear it could become a new front.
Thank you very much.
As Israel reels from its darkest day, and as Gaza faces its own, the world is trying to stop this getting any worse than it already is. Alistair Bunker, Sky News in Tel Aviv.
Well, with no side in this war backing down, an escalation seems inevitable. The UK has now responded by sending Royal Navy ships and spy planes to support Israel. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, is in Ashdod in southern Israel. That's close to the Gaza border. And Deborah, the Prime Minister here has produced what he will say is justification for an all-out war on Hamas. Do you think that a ground invasion is now pretty inevitable?
Yes, I do. The Israeli military has said that they plan to kill every single Hamas militant that took part in the attack over the weekend. And they can't do that realistically from the sky alone, which then points, of course, to this inextricable expansion of Israeli forces that have been massing, preparing in case the government gives the order to go in. They've said that that decision hasn't been taken yet. But the Israeli government needs not only to send this decisive message that they're saying to destroy Hamas, but they also need to send a huge, significant message of support and reassurance to the Israeli people whose confidence in their armed forces, in their intelligence apparatus, has been gravely shaken by the events of the weekend. And finally, the Israelis need as well to reassert that sense of deterrence that the Israeli military has always had in this region, where regional actors are watching closely about what's happening here, how Israel responds, and whether they can exploit this crisis further.
Right, and the UK sending warships and spy planes to the region.
Yes, it's a very a symbolic signal, a show of support. The British Prime Minister saying that this plan to send surveillance aircraft, which are going to be operational tomorrow in the region, surveilling any kind of malign activity such as the transfer of weapons, that this is about sending a message of support to Israel and also about deterrence and trying to help stabilise and prevent this crisis from escalating further. The two Royal Fleet auxiliary ships, they're large support ships, though not warships, are going to be in the region in the Eastern Mediterranean from next week with Royal Marines on board. Again, a symbol of support. But it's not really a show of significant military strength like the US has done in recent days, sending an enormous carrier strike group. Yet together, the UK and the US really sort of showing this solidarity with Israel at this dangerous, dangerous time.
OK, Deborah, thank you very much indeed. Well, Israel's military chief today admitted his forces failed to protect the 1,300 people killed by Hamas. But Sky News witnessed yet another security failing today at the site of this weekend's festival massacre, or last weekend's festival massacre. Our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey was there as a rogue Hamas fighter was found still at the site today and watched as he opened fire on Israel's defence forces. Here is his report.
It was a celebration of life that ended in chaos, carnage and cold-blooded murder. The Nova Festival site in southern Israel seems almost suspended in time. It's the scene of the worst terror attack in Israel's history. Over 250 young men and women were slain by Hamas fighters. This is the first time we've been allowed in. Teams of recovery specialists are conducting fingertip searches for human remains burnt during the attack on Saturday morning. Stunned-looking soldiers are slowly making their way through the festival campsites. They're checking for personal belongings and potential booby traps left by the Hamas raiding party. The cars that people try to escape in but found themselves trapped litter the entire festival site, often burnt beyond recognition, sometimes peppered with bullets and smashed during the massacre that took place here. It's tense. From nowhere, soldiers start running. Shots are fired, 2 now, and the army are running. Down here, the press have been called forward. We know there's been incidents around this area throughout today, and something is definitely happening now. You can see the soldiers running. Machine guns raised, the suspect is told to undress. They worry he has a suicide vest. He had emerged with a knife in his hand. The man is then forced to the floor and is blindfolded and his hands bound. Other soldiers take defensive positions to protect their colleagues. There could easily be more Hamas militants still hiding. This type of encounter has been happening since Saturday in southern Israel. It shows how volatile the situation still is.
Get inside, everyone get inside!
The reason we have so many forces here is because this whole area is still dangerous. We waited an hour on the outskirts of this area because they were afraid that there are still terrorists here. We're here under guard, but we need to let the people do their job. People were massacred here. There's reason to be on high alert.
The festival was abruptly stopped when rockets started exploding around the partygoers. Many decided to stay where they were. Others joined traffic queues trying to leave. And then the shooting started. Many simply didn't stand a chance. Survivors say the attack was lightning quick. How did you get away? Did you run?
As I said, we just autopilot, you know, pure instincts, and this is what I can say about myself. A lot of friends, a lot of people didn't make it.
The removal of bodies has happened, but the clear-up has barely got underway. This is a massive crime scene, of course, and Israel is promising to avenge the deaths of its young people. This murderous event happened on Saturday morning, but even now, after another day, more troops are being deployed to this and many other sites. Only Hamas knows how many of their assassins remain inside this country. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Southern Israel.
You're watching a special programme on the war between Israel and Hamas. Still to come, I'll be speaking to the Israeli rescue service MASSACRE as it continues to recover bodies across Israel. And we examine the war taking place online as misinformation is spread on social media. Also, relatives of missing people who are feared to have been taken hostage appeal for their safe return.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Well, before the break, we brought you Stuart Ramsey's report from the site of this weekend's festival massacre. The unimaginable job of recovering the 260 bodies and those communities targeted by Hamas in the following hours was carried out by the rescue service Zaka. Well, joining me on the phone from Ashkelon now is Yossi Lando, who is commander of Zaka down there. Thank you very much for being with us. And I just wonder, first of all, what did you think when you first saw what confronted you at the scene of these massacres?
Good evening. As we all know, the tragedy that we went through on Saturday, October 7th, when all of a sudden the holiday and Saturday was supposed to be a family gathering and sitting, praying and having fun with the family. So I left my house at noon, 12 o'clock, after we were woken up at 6:30 in the morning with sirens and rockets all over Israel. And then when I got to the scene, as I approached the scene, I saw bodies all over lying on the street and gunfire all over, and I had to use my gun too in order to fight back. But yeah, I understand, we're in attack, we have gunfire, but then the next day when we approached the area from where it was the festival, and it looked like a massacre field. It was terrible. It was 70% of the people were shot in the back, and multiple shots. Cars on the road were just burned with live people inside. They just received a missile, an RPG or shoulder missile, whatever it is, and or hand grenades, and they were burned to death. You're talking, all of them is youngsters, people as the life is still in front of them. Okay, so that was the second level. Then when we went further and we went into the kibbutzim and kibbutz Be'eri, that was the I hope in the entire, for the next generation or so, for the next 5 generations or forever, this should be the next level, because this was the last level. I'm 33 years. I'm 33 years in Zaka.
Sorry, Yossi. Let me just ask you. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to ask you. You've been to all these sites, picking up these bodies. Can anything prepare someone for what you have been doing these last few days?
No. Absolutely no. This is the most awful, this is the most nightmare that you can see, and I'll give you, I know it's very hard to put it to the media, people are listening to it, but I have to say it, you know, it's a little relief for me and for my crew. When we enter a house, it was a normal, beautiful, nice house, and I see a female on the floor with a full blood around her. And I see a gunshot wound in the back of her head. And when we turn her over to put it in a body bag, she was a pregnant woman. And the stomach was open, ripped open. The baby, it's an infant, a non-born infant, stabbed.
Yossi, look, these are really difficult things for you to talk about, and these are really difficult things for you to talk about, and I appreciate you coming on the program. So difficult for you, but listen, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Thank you. That was Yossi Landau, whose job it is to go around these sites and deal with these bodies. This is Sky News live from Jerusalem. Coming up, I'll be speaking to the brother of Yonat Or, who's believed to have been kidnapped with her husband and 2 of their children. And the UN Security Council set to hold an emergency session tomorrow, but what can it achieve? Just some breaking news to update you with back in the UK. And Sky News understands that 4 Jewish schools across London will not open on Friday. That's amid security concerns. I will get more on that story as we get it. Now, in London, the British families of Israelis who are believed to have been taken hostage by Hamas have pleaded for help in securing their release. The missing include a mother who was disconnected from her oxygen supply and another who should be celebrating her 75th birthday. Ivor Bennett has this report.
They are the faces of just some of the dozens who are still missing. From infants to the elderly, 5 days on, their fate is still unknown. For relatives like Noam, a British Israeli, it is an agonising wait. His mother is among those who are taken.
It's very, very, very hard, and we hope for good news every moment, every phone. You know, I'm jumping like a lion, and she was supposed to come here just now, today, to celebrate her 75th birthday. We're supposed to go, all of us together, to Devon and spend some time in a place that she loves so much. She considered that as second home for her. And it's not happening.
His pain was made worse by seeing this, the kidnappers approaching his mother's home in footage they shared online. Her car could also be seen on fire. But where others mourn their loved ones, Noam counts himself lucky.
Compared to a lot of my friends who have their parents, their daughters, their sons, their brothers and sisters confirmed dead, butchered, slaughtered. So I have the luxury to worry, because at least that, you know, there is hope in that.
At a press conference in London, he appealed for the hostages' safe release alongside Sharon Lifshitz. She's missing both her parents, whose home was left ransacked. They're in their 80s and require medication. Without it, she fears they won't survive.
I'm petrified and horrified, and at the same time, I know they're strong, and I don't know. I have thrown myself into trying to release them. I cannot sit back. I cannot look at the media. I cannot do all these things. I can just fight to shorten the time, so maybe there is a chance.
The atrocities happened more than 2,000 miles from here, but it's clear their impact is no less acute for those it affects. Ivor Bennett, Sky News in London.
Well, it's a similar story across the world as desperate relatives wait for news on loved ones being held captive in Gaza. I'm joined now by Ahal Besarai, who grew up in Be'eri kibbutz but now lives in the Philippines. His sister, her husband and their 2 children were dragged from their home on Saturday morning and are still missing. Ahal, thank you very much for coming on the programme this evening. First of all, have you been able to piece together from accounts of what happened precisely the fate of your family?
Hi, good evening. Not exactly, you know, because it's such a complicated situation, but there are eyewitnesses or an eyewitness who saw them pulled out of the house, of the burning house, after the terrorists burned the house to force them out of the mamad, the safety room. And because that, we are of the assumption that they are alive and taken away, because on other occasions we understand that people were just shot on sight and someone saw them actually pulled out of their house alive and taken away. So, but they are reported missing, and we don't have clear evidence that they are still alive. Yesterday, there were 108 bodies pulled out of Be'eri, but you know, thank God, none of the bodies were theirs. So you know, there's still hope.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I gather that you were on the phone either shortly before, on the phone with your sister shortly before or during the attack. Is that right?
Yeah, I was speaking to her. And then, you know, the last time I called, you know, she was whispering because I think the house was already circled by terrorists. And she basically just said, Ali, I cannot talk right now. And, you know, just hang up the phone. And then from there on, I just was not able to get hold of her.
And I gather that you've been going through hours of Hamas videos that they've posted to see if you can identify where your family are. Yeah, so, you know, there are so many of these horrendous videos around, you know, that, you know, I just personally, not together with some friends, just go through to, you know, just try to get a glimpse of, you know, maybe a face, maybe something that I can recognize and see, you know, get some confirmation that they are actually captured. And, you know, also to realize the you know, well-being or, you know, the situation from a health point of view, either injured, not injured. And, you know, it's horrendous because, you know, some of the posting are so graphical of people shot in the head or beheaded or, I mean, you know, now Hamas is removing these sort of videos because they understand the negative impact it has on the savagery. You know, I did it even before. It's tough, but I have not seen any sign of them, unfortunately. No. And I think we have images of your family, actually, that were provided by you, and I think we can show them. Yes. I just want to ask you, Ahal, yeah, there we are. I just want to ask you, Ahal, what would your message be this evening to the people who are holding them? You know, they are just civilians. It's two children, you know, a son who is 15, a daughter who is 13. You know, they are children. They have no hatred in their hearts towards you or at all. I think it's appalling, you know, to hold innocent people hostages and use them as tools of war, as negotiation pieces. And, you know, just release them, you know, because it's against international law. It's probably also against Islam, which something you fight in the name of. So just release them, you know, and release all the other children, old people, and women, you know, that have no role in this dispute. Yeah. Yeah. Please. Well, you know, Ahal, please. Look, I hope this. I was going to say, I hope this resolves itself happily for you, and thank you very much for coming on to tell the story. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Not at all. Now, while fighting rages on the ground and in the skies, an information war is taking place online. Misinformation can be amplified by the power of social media. So what should you look out for to make sure you're not caught out? Here's our technology correspondent, Arti Nachiappan.
The scale of the disinformation circulating is such that it even caught the eye of EU regulators, who gave Elon Musk 24 hours to address the problem on X, formerly known as Twitter. Let's have a look at some of the posts that got the most attention. This is one of the most prolific. It's a video that was posted on TikTok showing a fire in an urban area. Some of the people who shared it said it showed attacks on Gaza. Others said it was filmed showing the Israeli skyline following a Hamas strike. Either way, it clocked up 2.9 million likes and over 59.6 million views, with loads more accounts reposting it. But the video was actually circulating over the internet well before Saturday's attack ever took place. Other similar videos showed that this scene was actually filmed in Algeria during celebrations for the football team CR Belouizdad. This post on X allegedly shows a Hamas fighter with a kidnapped Israeli girl. It's been posted across multiple accounts and amassed millions of views. But Sky News' data and forensics team found that the video was originally posted back in September, meaning it's got nothing to do with current events. X has since put up a community note under the post sharing the video, explaining that it's unrelated to the conflict. This single post got 2.6 million views. It shows a helicopter being shot down near a coastal area. It was said to show a Hamas fighter shooting down an Israeli war helicopter in Gaza. But if we take a closer look at the video, there are clear signs that it was generated by a computer. We did a reverse image search on it, and that found that it was actually from a video game called Arma 3. We contacted TikTok, X, Snapchat, and Meta for comment. Meta said they've got a team working round the clock since Saturday to keep their platform safe. X responded to the EU's warning over their handling of alleged disinformation. They said they'd bolstered their community notes team, which is designed to give context to posts. They've said here, based on our most recent analysis, notes related to the conflict are showing on X quickly at a median time of about 5 hours after the post creation time. But we all know that posts on social media can spread across the world in a matter of minutes. So there's a high risk that, by that point, the damage has already been done.
You're watching a Sky News special programme. Coming up, calls for greater protection of children in the war. I'll be speaking to the Chief Executive of War Child.
So when I lost my baby 5 months into pregnancy, I felt embarrassed. I thought, what are other people going to think about me? I thought I must have killed him. Something I did must have killed him. And none of these things are true. And until people actually began telling me, obstetrician gynecologists and friends and specialists said, you know, it's very difficult for you to actually kill your baby or be the cause of the loss of that pregnancy. There's so much shame and silence, and as you said, it's uncomfortable for people around you to speak about this loss. So by more and more people speaking up, it does just become one of those things that you can cope with more as the person who lost the baby, but also everyone surrounding that person is able to say, I know a little bit more about this experience and therefore won't say the clumsy things that are completely well-meaning but are incredibly hurtful a lot of the time to those parents that have lost the baby. It's that thing about you can't blame anybody, because until it happened to me, I might have said things that weren't particularly comforting or appropriate too. But as you said, I'm glad you can get pregnant. You're young, you're healthy, you're in a relationship, or it's proof that you can carry children if you have one already. But these things are not helpful, and until you really begin to understand that, it's only then that people can really say the right thing. And I think starting with, I'm sorry that this happened to you, and just listening to the parents or those surrounding the parents who want to talk about this loss is a really good place to start, and crucial in allowing the parent to feel validated. Because when I lost my baby, I met him, he was a baby, and lots of people don't understandably understand that it wasn't just cells or a small mass. There's a baby that comes if it's later in pregnancy. And I felt very conscious of the fact that I was calling him my baby, and I was almost embarrassed to say my baby when the doctors were referring to him as a late miscarriage. So for me, it's baby loss all the way along, from the very moment you see the pregnancy line to full term.
Let's turn now to the plight of children caught up in this war between Israel and Hamas. The militant group has been criticised for its tactic of killing and kidnapping children in Israel, while Gaza's health ministry says a third of the people killed in Israeli airstrikes are children. Well, I'm joined now by Rob Williams, Chief Executive of War Child UK. Thank you very much for being with us, Rob. And the one thing I think you can say for certain is that, as in all wars, it is children bearing the brunt.
Children are particularly vulnerable in a conflict. They are often not old enough to make the right decisions about how to be safe. They're psychologically not mature enough to cope with the stress and the trauma that extreme violence generates. And they are unique in terms of their vulnerability. And so when you see pictures of children having been killed, it is pretty much the most shocking thing you can see. War Child started in Bosnia in 1993, founded by people who were shocked to see children being targeted by snipers in Sarajevo. And people who want to cause shock and terror understand that if you target children, you will have a huge psychological impact. And that's what we're seeing. And what worries us the most about this situation is that there are hundreds of thousands of children in Israel and in Gaza who, having seen this extreme violence, will have huge psychological issues that need to be addressed. And if they're unaddressed, they can produce traumatic symptoms for months and years, and actually make it really hard for normal child development to take place. This is a psychological disaster for children, as well as everything else that's been said about this conflict.
Yeah, and that is the trauma going forward. Just in the immediate future, what are you able to do? What is your organisation able to do to get in and help as many children as you can?
Well, our mission at the core of every place we work in is to see if we can provide maximum protection for children. We're really focused on their psychological health. So we are very skilled at helping children who've experienced trauma to manage to cope with that, to learn the skills that they need to deal with the stress of living in a highly dangerous conflict zone, and to preserve their hope, their ability to deal with other people, and their ability to learn. So education is the other half of what we do. So we have been working in Gaza and in the West Bank since 2006. Of course, our team in Gaza right now is sheltering along with their children. They're not able to set up or expand the services that we had already operating. And we are waiting for the moment when it is safe to go out and scale up with our local partners. But there is going to be a huge need for psychological support in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you finally, we've got about a minute left. It does look as if things are going to get considerably worse in Gaza in the coming weeks.
Yes. When it comes to children, they are under special protection by international humanitarian law. There are a number of grave violations designated by the UN. Killing of children is one, and we have seen that. Hamas committed that crime on Saturday. Abduction of children is another. But also the denial of humanitarian assistance to children is another grave violation. So we and many, many other NGOs are calling on the parties in this violence to respect international law, particularly the rights of children. And the main duty bearers here are Hamas and Israel. There's a very grave responsibility on people who carry weapons to respect and protect children who should not be involved in the fighting and who need to be separated from combatants.
OK, Rob, thank you very much for sparing your time this evening. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, amid calls for a ceasefire and a humanitarian aid corridor into Gaza, tomorrow the UN Security Council will convene in New York, and America's top diplomat will head for talks with the Palestinian president. Let's look ahead to all this with our US correspondent Mark Stone. So next stop for Antony Blinken then, Jordan and Qatar. What is he likely to achieve, do you think?
Yes, a series of vital diplomatic moments, which are all vital in their own way over the next day or so for Antony Blinken, the US top diplomat. He will head to Amman in Jordan, first of all, where he will meet the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. Now, the optics of that meeting will be difficult for some, but clearly Mahmoud Abbas does not represent Hamas. He represents the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. Clearly, conversations with him will be absolutely vital. But it will be a difficult meeting, I imagine, and I don't think we will hear words from the two of them after their meeting. That's the first one. He'll meet the King of Jordan in Amman as well. That will be key. Jordan has, throughout this long conflict, been a key broker to both sides. Jordan, of course, will be helpful in trying to open up aid corridors into Gaza. That will be a focus there. Then he'll head to Qatar, which will be another key moment because Qatar has a direct line to Hamas. And so the hostages will be the focus there, trying to work out some way to secure the release of the hostages who are in Gaza. And I think the Qataris will be absolutely key to that. And from there, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and I think the focus of those meetings will be broader. Those meetings will be trying to work out what happens next in terms of how this war could spread and how those countries, key countries, can help prevent its spread. And in the last few minutes, interestingly, the Iranian foreign minister, of course, aligned to Hamas, has said that the continuation of crimes, Israeli crimes, he is saying, will receive a response from the rest of the Axis. Now, that is a reference to other aligned groups to Iran, perhaps rising up, Hezbollah in the north, Syria, perhaps, proxies in Syria rising up. And that is, for Israel, the big concern. And that, Mark, is how the war spreads.
Yeah, and the Security Council, as I was mentioning, meeting tomorrow. I mean, it's difficult to see what they can do to, stop this going ahead in the way we think it's going to go ahead.
Yeah, the Security Council is often accused, or the UN is often accused of being toothless. This is a closed meeting. It's the second meeting they've had since this crisis. The reason they've chosen a closed meeting and not an open meeting around that forum of the Security Council, I think, is because they do not want any publicly inflammatory comments to raise tensions even further. Inflammatory comments on either side from any member of the Security Council could cause problems. So the closed meeting allows for more candour. It's been called by Brazil, who holds the presidency of the Security Council at the moment. And the focus of that meeting, Mark, will be humanitarian aid into Gaza. One final thought, though. I wonder whether the UN will come into a very important role down the line, because if Israel succeeds in wiping out Hamas in its entirety, then the people of Gaza, 2 million people, are going to need to be governed by someone. And I wonder, this is a long way down the line, but I wonder whether the UN, a blue beret role, UN force might have a role to play down the line.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see what the Security Council come up with. Mark, thank you very much indeed. And that is all for this special programme from Jerusalem on a night Benjamin Netanyahu produced images that will shock the world, and ones that he will say justify an even bigger assault on Gaza. The enclave has once again been under siege from the sky, repeated airstrikes, its people trapped inside without power and with dwindling supplies of food and water. They are waiting and watching, as the world is, for what comes next.